We are going to talk about how you can monetize your brand ambassador work. Just a little bit of background on my family. When I married my husband many years ago, I got a 3-for-1 deal. I married the world's greatest fighter pilot, and I also got 2 bonus daughters in the process. My husband, who was in the Guard at the time, said, let's go back into the active duty Air Force and we can see the world. So we took a $50,000 a year pay cut to go into the active duty world. And what he actually showed me was 5 more children in the next 7 years. So that's 7 children to financially support, and we moved 11 times in 13 years. And I learned very quickly I was going to have to learn to look at life in a funny way, or I was going to end up on the funny farm. And so my kids have helped me to be able to do that. In continuing that story, I'm also married into $40,000 worth of undisclosed consumer debt. I just knew he looked good in a flight suit, and I didn't ask him for his credit report. Today, when our children bring home their significant others, they had better bring that what? Credit report too, because we want to know that up front. If you start to do the math, and I know a lot of people in here do math, we were having significant financial problems because I was a broker in Texas and I had a business background. I was very young. I had a little bit in savings, but not much. But we had to put 1/3 of our income towards child support. 1/3 of our income went to state and federal taxes. We tithed 10% off of our income, which left us leaving 23% to live off of and to be able to service all that consumer debt. And there was one point, because when I married into that debt, all the credit cards were just charged to the hilt. There was one point when we didn't have enough money for groceries. And for me, it was really embarrassing, and I even felt shamed by that because here is my husband, an officer, a captain, a fighter pilot, and we have no money for groceries. And the way that that actually worked out was we went to go pick up the girls at their grandma's house. They were remodeling their kitchen. She didn't know we had a need for this, but she gave us 12 bags of groceries. And that's how we ate for the next 2 weeks. And I remember doing a Scarlett O'Hara thing. After the Civil War, she went back home. She was in a turnip field, and there was nothing to eat but those turnips. And I remember in that scene, she's holding her hands up towards the heaven, and she says, "As God is my witness, neither me nor none of my kin will ever grow hungry again." And that's what I said. We are never going to be in this situation again. And so what started as a disaster ended up being a delight at all of the end of it, because I began to take that business background and that creativity and put it towards paying down consumer debt. So within 2.5 years, we were completely debt-free off one military man's income with a lot of children to support along the way. So it can happen. I started volunteering, teaching other people how to do that. My speaking led to a book deal with a royalty-based publisher. It went on to become a bestseller, and it launched what we now know as extreme couponing. It came out in 1998, and it ushered in that movement. From that point on, I started to publish a book a year, a 50,000-word book a year with a royalty-based publisher. So I published with Random House and with Harper Rose, Simon Schuster, places like that. So as I began to publish books, media came along. And as media began to come along, I started having more opportunities in that area. And then, eventually, brand ambassador work came along. And those kinds of opportunities were, when you put all of those streams of income together, they allowed me to retire with financial independence about 10 years ago and have enough money to put all kids through college debt-free. They earned a lot of scholarships. They earned $2.5 million worth of scholarships, but we covered the rest. And to be able to pay for all the weddings and everything else. So that's how I got there, but I didn't get there by leaving money on the table when it comes to brand ambassador work. So that's what I'd like to talk to you guys about today. And we're going to learn the secrets of how to earn a 6-figure income as a brand ambassador. Secret number 1, and yes, that is an airplane. To change the slide, that's a nod to not only my husband, but one of my sons is a fighter pilot. He flies the F-15E Strike Eagle as well. So that's a nod to them. And that's the story that you just heard was my family there and how they we went all along together on this for the ride. The very first number secret is understanding diversification. So as you're going through this, it's important to understand that you can make more money as a spokesperson or a brand ambassador if you have a greater skill set. Because there are campaigns that will come your way that can involve a lot of these different areas that we're talking about. So some of you may be bloggers, some may be podcasters, but some may not be public speakers. I kind of want to get an idea of who's here today. Who is already working in the brand and ambassador space, have had a few contracts, you're currently in the space? You're getting them, okay, yeah, over here, okay, I see you there, all right, over here, okay. All right, how many of you are like on the cusp of that? You feel like you're getting there. Okay, and then how many of you are really proactive and you're here to get information and to see, I think I see myself, yes, okay, doing that in the future. Well, in 2014, I gave this presentation for the first time ever. I gave it to a room with just 40 people in it. And 6 of those people went out and they were making anywhere from 0 to 5K in some of the brand work. And by applying these principles, they're now making 6 figures. And so it really can work. And that was the title of it because it was like, this is how I made 6 figures. And I was really shocked that after I taught it once that they could make 6 figures too. So this is something that you can do if you have a continually growing platform. So it's not like these people just sat back. They did the work. They grew their social numbers. They diversified their skill set, worked on it, and it just really started to flow. So writing, most of you already do that, whether it's writing a book or a blog or articles, diversify that because you would not believe how many brand campaigns come along and they want you to do some writing for them. So that's important to have that skill set. And I think most everybody in here has that. The next one is speaking. I just came from a great panel. If you buy the virtual pass, it's $100 to buy this virtual pass, and it will more than pay for itself. Look at the panel that Bethany Bayless, our wonderful MC, moderated, and on how to get paid for speaking with Grant Baldwin and with others. So that's a really good resource to go to develop that. If you're working on your public speaking, I do recommend Toastmasters. And the reason for that is it will help you get some of the nasty habits that you have in your speech that you may not even be aware of. So the first time I went on national television, I had a 3-minute interview, and I said, "That's right," 15 times. And I was mortified. Who even wants to show anybody that clip? It was a great clip it was great on a great show, but I couldn't even use it because I didn't have anyone in my life, I wasn't going to Toastmasters, that could help me get those busy words out of my vocabulary. So that's something that Toastmasters can do for you. I'm an established speaker. I've been at Toastmasters for about 4.5 years, and the reason I go now is to be able to test out new material. So if I'm telling a joke, I'd rather tell it in front of 20 friends that love me rather than 2,000 people that don't. And so that's a great way to do that. And then also I use it to practice poignant stories. And so if this one lady doesn't tear up, then it's not touching. So that's speaking. The other one is media. And this is all kinds of media to be able to do that. Develop that skill set. You're going to see why in a little bit when I share specific deliverables and what those are worth. So if you have the skill set of being able to do media, and to start out with going on local shows, pitch them, and then do radio, television, do media of all kinds, because that's going to be an important skill set also. And then the spokesperson and brand ambassador work. And the reason I list that there is because brand work leads to brand work. So if you're in the space and you start to do it, there are renewals, there are referrals. And a lot of these PR firms talk amongst themselves. And so they may need someone for a whiskey campaign. And you did a financial campaign, but you were so good that they want to hire you to do this other campaign, and it's a non-compete, so you can get hired to be able to do that. So if you're not diversified, work on getting really good at all kinds of things. The next thing, which also has to do with our secret number 1, and that is to become an expert. You need to have expert status of some kind. If you're a brand, yeah, it's important to have a platform, but as you're developing that platform and you're expanding, and sometimes having a really nice platform and a really nice following can kind of make you an expert, but you also need to actually legitimately have expert status. And so some of the common things, we have Kanae Corder here. She is a licensed financial therapist, and that is an accreditation. Others are CFPs. There are CPAs. Another thing that can make you an expert is authoring a book, is speaking in the space, years of experience in this space. It's fascinating to me how many people that are working in the financial realm and they're doing great things, they're making an impact, but they don't have the 3 letters after their name. They are not necessarily CFPs or CPAs. So you don't have to be that, but you do have to have that body of work and that experience to be an expert. You can get this way by contributing. So we have freelancers that are out there working everywhere, constantly contributing to whatever space that you're in this case, maybe a financial space, and that can really help. If you are a blogger or a podcaster, that does in and of itself give you a measure of credit, of media expert status to be able to do that. Secret number 2 is to understand the responsibilities of a brand ambassador or a spokesperson. So I'm going to start going through what some specific responsibilities are, and here's why. A little bit later, we're going to be going through the process. But if someone calls you and they say, hey, you know what, are you available? Are you currently locked down for a financial services brand? That's how these conversations usually start. And we were thinking of having you do a few blogs, some social posts, and maybe an RMT. And if your next answer is, what is an RMT? You've lost the gig. So you have to know what some of these responsibilities are. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily believe in fake it until you make it, but I did at first because I learned what an RMT and an SMT were. So let me tell you what they are. It's a satellite media tour or a radio media tour. A satellite media tour is where you go in studio. Usually you hit out of New York or maybe LA or Chicago. It's usually some major place. Most of my hits, I've done 100 SMTs. Most of them are hit out of New York. And you show up to go into makeup at about 4 in the morning. You may go through some rehearsals. And then at 6 o'clock usually in the morning, you have your first media hit. Anybody in this room has ever done an SMT? Yes, Jerry, in the front row here. You've done, how many have you done, Jerry? Okay, so she's done 1, or 5 or 6. I mean, so talk to her if you want a little bit more, because we don't have time to really unpack that too much, but you can talk to her about that. Have you done them? What it is? Satellite media tour. So let me continue. I was just kind of taking a pulse as to how many people have actually done it. So satellite media tour. So you start in the morning. Your first hit, meaning your first time you're on television, is at 6 a.m. You have have a camera in front of you, and you're out on the satellite. And so when you're doing a hit for your first news show of the morning, anybody else that's on that satellite can watch you. And it's really important when you do your first hit that you don't stink. Because if you're not very good and they're not quite so sure if they're going to drop you in to the morning schedule, if they watch you, then they'll go ahead and keep you in. But if it's too commercial sounding or it's something they don't want, you can drop out of the schedule. So now 4 or 5 cities that were supposed to have you on that tour originally are dropping out one by one. So it's really important that the first few hits that you don't stink and that you don't sound too commercial. Because if it's too commercial, it's not going to go on the news shows. They're going to cancel it. So there are creative ways to be able to deliver the messaging that the client wants you to, but still use your voice. So they are hiring you for your voice. They are hiring you for your platform. And before you start to do the work for them, as you're going over messaging points and things like that, that's where you push back and say, well, if I say it that way, it sounds inauthentic to me, sounds a little bit like a commercial. How about us saying it this way? And so that's where the organic nature of some of this brand ambassador work actually works. So you hit first at 6 a.m. and then you wake up America for the next 4 hours. And every 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at the most, in between hits, you're doing the very same thing. Because the talent, the news anchors on the other end of the camera, they get a script, and 9 times out of 10, they follow that script that is given to them. They ask you the very same questions. And a good spokesperson will be as high energy like Bethany Bayless, from the very first all the way up to the 35th interview of the day. So that's 4 to 5 hours of back-to-back-to-back-to-back satellite media tour interviews. And trust me, having done quite a few of these, they start to all blur together, and it's the same questions. And sometimes if you go on autopilot, it's like, what question did they just ask? And so it can get a little bit dicey, but those pay anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 for one morning's worth of work. Jerry. And Jerry has been paid $50,000. So those can be really lucrative, and you can make a lot of money at it, but you have to have that skill set. I mean, anything can happen on live television. There was one time when Phoenix went over and Seattle came in early, and both of those are kind of nice markets. I mean, they're not tiny markets. And they were in my ear at the same time. And Phoenix was signing off saying, Ellie, thank you for joining us today on the show. And at the very same moment, Seattle was introducing me. Today we have America's Family Financial Expert joining us. So I looked at the camera and I said, thank you for having me. And it fit both. Dropped the mic, but I'm wearing a lavalier. So, and then another time I lost audio. So I started in my ear. So I'm hearing it like that, and I think, okay, and it was Chicago. So I'm thinking, okay, if I say I don't have audio, I can't hear you, we lose that hit altogether for the client. But it was like hit number 18 of the day. And I knew the pacing, and so I just started taking the questions in my mind. And then I figured if I start talking and I'm talking over them, they'll stop talking. And we did the entire interview, and no one ever knew I lost audio. So it's a unique skill set. It's not necessarily for everyone, but it is extremely lucrative once you do that. RMTs are the same, similar, but the beauty of an RMT is if you have a good line, like a landline that's usually grounded, you can do them from home in your pajamas. So you can do a radio media tour from home. They don't pay as much as satellite media tours, but they're usually making anywhere from 8 to about 16. Jerry's probably got paid 40 for those. Okay. All right, so there's that. And then there's social media tours. Those are pretty self-explanatory, where you're going to be doing social posts on a regular basis out everywhere. I'm sure a lot of you have heard how, is it Kylie Jenner? Is that it? That gets $1 million per Instagram post. These posts, usually if you're working in the space and you're doing well, are anywhere from $600 per post, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those platforms. All the way up for someone really working in the space is getting $5,000 a post. And it's not necessarily outrageous for them to get that amount. So those are some deliverables as well. Sometimes you have desk side interviews. So you'll go maybe to a convention and you'll be interviewed by podcasters that are all there, or you'll be interviewed by bloggers that have all gathered. They may fly you out to New York City, and you go to the Wall Street Journal, then you go to Huffington Post, and you actually physically go with a driver to all of these different places, and you do those kinds of interviews. And those are just some examples of some of the deliverables that are a part of being a brand ambassador or a spokesperson. And then one of the things that I do for my clients is that, because it's really important to brainstorm with one of your team members. I will be a team member for financial clients, because sometimes the people that are paying you will ask you for ideas. And specifically about, well, do you have ideas about, you know, teaching kids about money? What would you say to this kind of thing? And so it's great to have a lot of ideas to be able to do that. Also, building an email list will help you, because sometimes the responsibility means sending it out to your community via an email list. And those are usually to send it out to your community, depending on the size of your email list and the open rate. You can charge anywhere from about $3,000 all the way up to $20,000 just to send it out to your tribe. And when I give you these numbers, I'm telling you like the top level of people that are at FinCon, not celebrities. Not Gene Chatsky, not Susie Orman, not those kinds of people that are celebrity spokespersons. This is something for people that are actually in our community that they can do that. And I know I'm going through this really fast, but I want to leave room for questions at the end and take as many of your questions as I can. But I want to talk about messaging, because you can get a job, you can get a really nice gig, even have a lot of deliverables on it, get paid a lot, but if you don't understand this concept of messaging, then you're not going to get another gig, at least with the same people that have been repping that first. When you are delivering messaging, let's say they are sending you out to do a public speaking gig. One time I worked for a coalition of Jumpstart and You Promise, and they had the world's largest piggy bank that was being unwrapped by children that lived in Harlem that had created it. So it was this big, huge event. And I had to go and give a speech, and there was a lot of other deliverables associated with it. There was a satellite media tour associated with it, and a lot of different things. And when I went out, I had messaging points that I had to deliver in that speech. And in the media training day that you have before you go out, they will tell you what that messaging is. And in the messaging, that's where you push back with the client and say, go shop at Walmart. Walmart is a great place to be able to shop. And you say, I can't do that. That is just way too commercial. So there's other ways to work in their messaging. Once you agree upon the messaging, then that is the messaging that you need to deliver. And it's fascinating to me that some of this messaging that you're delivering is just so organic that it satisfies the client, but the audience never even knows that that's messaging. So if you've written a book, this is what's cool. If you have a book, especially if it's a royalty-based book rather than an e-book, if you have a book, that is now a timely thing that's coming out, and it can help you get hired, because you can go on the news stations because they want you because you have a book. But when you go out on behalf of a client, you are not there to promote your book. When you're introduced on the air, they will say, Ellie Kay, the author of Living Rich for Less. And they'll mention your book, and if you don't understand what messaging is all about, your mindset is going to be, I'm here to promote the book. That's why they hired me, is to promote the book. I've got to be sure and mention the book. No, you don't even have to mention the book once. But you do have to mention what they hired you to be able to talk about, which is a new app or a new website or a new product or service of some kind that they've hired you to be able to work, to be able to deliver. And if that is a problem for you, then don't take the gig. Don't become a brand ambassador. We'll talk about FTC disclosures a little bit later, but all of those are in place so that everything you do is legal and above board. But you are being hired to be able to promote a product or a service on behalf of the client. I have the distinction, because I've worked really hard on it, of having 100% messaging in all of my tours. And sometimes they have primary messaging, secondary messaging, and third messaging. And that doesn't mean I've hit all three in every one of the events that I've done. But if you hit at least one, their primary, then you've delivered it, and you can be 100% as well. And in this world of spokesperson work, they don't want you to do a satellite media tour and miss Phoenix because you didn't mention any of the messaging. They've lost Phoenix, and they'll be really upset, and you probably won't get hired again. So you have to be able to understand that it's all about messaging. Now, I've got a little bit of a lesson that we're going to do. This is like a workshop. MacGyver is going to come up here and get this to playing. It's a little bit of a long clip, but I'm going to go ahead and play all of it because there's multiple messaging in this. And granted, This is a longer clip than what you normally get when you're on television, but I want you to tell me what the primary messaging is and what some of the secondary messaging is as well.
Live in Las Vegas.
EQL, knowledge is power, and it's also getting really pricey.
That's right. The cost of college can be hard to cover. That's why we've called in a financial expert to help you plan ahead. She's going to join us live from New York right after the break. Hey everybody, welcome back to Fox 5 News Live in Las Vegas at 8:43 right now. College is hard enough for students. Where do I go? How am I going to make friends? How am I going to survive all these tests? What am I going to eat? How am I going to eat? Is it going to be enough? And for parents, how are we going to pay for it all? Well, Ellie Kay, America's family financial expert, joins us live from New York to tell you the secrets to graduating college debt-free. Okay, you know what? You are the star of the morning, if you can tell me that. Welcome. How you doing?
They can hear it.
Well, thanks. It's really great to be with you today.
All right, so tell us, I mean, a lot of college parents out there right now, they're wondering how they're going to pay for it. The economy is down. A lot of folks have lost their jobs. Please tell us, Ellie, how we can do this.
Well, you know, we have 7 children, and they're all set to graduate debt-free from college. 4 have already graduated from college, 2 are in college, and 1's headed towards school. They are all going to graduate debt-free. And one of the places that we start is we tell our children that our love for them is unconditional, but our money is conditional. So they are going to have to earn part of that college experience. They really are. Yeah, and you know, this translates, Monica, into the whole idea that they're going to have to earn college scholarships or do work-study programs or work during the summer. We had one daughter that took off between her sophomore and junior year to work. That entire year she went back to Columbia University and graduated well. So it really can be done, but you have to be the parent and you have to let them take responsibility for part of their college education.
You know, Ellie, I'm glad you said that you have to be the parent, because so many times we do these stories about parents wanting to be their kids' friends. I don't care about being my son's friend. I want to be his mother. You know, let's just be honest here. And I think that's a philosophy that has gone to the wayside and has a lot of young people depending on their parents in spite of their ability to work.
Well, that's true, Monica. And you know, we can speak our children's language. When we're trying to be the parent, we can actually talk to them in their own language. And one of the ways to do this is to empower them to be able to take responsibility for some of the things that they can control. For example, the 3rd largest expenditure right now behind tuition and room and board is textbooks. And the average student can cut that in half. It can be done if they're very strategic. And I'll tell you how to do that. First of all, go to the on-campus bookstore. That's where you're going to find a lot of different options from new, used, digital, and rental. Now, rental is one of my favorite because Follett's Rent-A-Text program enables you to save 50% or more. Plus, you can use those hard-earned financial aid dollars to pay for it if you're using an on-campus bookstore. And you're going to get free shipping. So why pay for something that you don't have to? Have it shipped to the bookstore, let your student go pick it up. That's an easy way to save 50% right there on the 3rd largest expenditure.
You know, Ellie, that's a really good thing you bring up, because I think when Jason and I were in college, digital and rental books were not available. So these kids have a lot of new options that are huge money savers.
Well, they do, and you know, rental, for example, is one of the best kept secrets more people need to understand. I just bought rental, save 52%. So there are some really good options out there. And another good option is the campus card. If you're going to send your child money, put it on the campus card, load it onto there. Then you know they're only spending it on the campus. It's a way for you to be able to still measure, have a measurement of control, and yet it gives them the freedom to fail. So you set them up for success, you give them the room to fail, and you give them a safety net in all of that.
You know what? I like you. Our love is unconditional, but our money is not. How can
tell them that?
Yeah. How can folks get a hold of all of your information, your book, all of your advice? Because this is good stuff.
Well, a lot of the things we've talked about today can be found at rentatext.com or my website, LEK.com, where I've blogged about everything that we've discussed.
Okay. All right. You got 7 kids and you're doing it, so I believe you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. It's really great being with you today, Monica.
And you too. Take care.
Okay.
That's some good information.
I got to
Well, they went and dished about it a little bit more, about how much they loved it, which the client liked too. All right, what was my filler word? What was my crutch word? Well, no, I'm not asking the messaging. What's my bad part? That I said too much? I said, you know? A lot, and I said well. So I had a couple crutch words that I'm judging myself on for that minute. Okay, who was my client? Who was my client? Follett. Follett is my client. And they felt like I mentioned it enough. They were very happy with that. Follett, they're the bookstore people. And they don't just do rentals, they sell books. Okay, what is the primary messaging in that Follett paid me to say? Okay, raise your hands because I can't hear all of them. In the back. Rent your textbooks. That is one of the messagings. It is. It is one of the primary messaging. Kanae. That was a good thing, and that was Ellie, and that's why they hired me, but that actually wasn't the messaging for them. That made it organic, though, and that's why it seemed natural. In the back over here? That was one of the messaging points. They want to talk about how it's the third largest expenditure. That was one of the other minor messaging points over here. You were the first person. Okay, so I've given this message about half a dozen times and shown that video. That was the primary messaging, and you're the first person that ever got it. Because by going into, the message was go into the campus bookstore, because Follett owns 80% of all campus bookstores. And so going in there was organic and natural and that. Anybody catch one more messaging over here? The campus card. Is that what you said? I didn't call on you. I'm going to call on you. What do you say? What is it, the other one? The campus card. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so that's a nice little exercise so that you guys can see how it's done and how you can make something organic. So let's talk about the process. So I started having, I did all of these other things. I was speaking, I wrote books, I was doing media, and then I started having these pings. So they started like reaching out to me, and I didn't know what to do with them. Quaker Oats, Dial Soap. So these people start reaching out to me, and we're saying the wrong answers, like what is an SMT, and clearly clueless. So I went and I tried to get my speakers bureau to handle it, and they would botch everything that came their way. I reached out to my publisher thinking, well, can they handle it? And it was illegal, it turns out, for them to be able to represent that. And finally, I got connected with a spokesperson agent, and she took 25% of what I made. And then eventually, I started because I am good at reading contracts, I started catching things that she didn't catch in the contract. And so instead of bringing her everything that came my way, I started repping my own. And eventually, that's how I repped most of my contracts. But I would still take things that she would bring to me, because 75% of 20,000 is better than 100% of zero. So that worked out for me at the time. But the process begins with an initial outreach of some kind, where they ask those questions like I've already mentioned. Are you under contract for an automobile insurance provider of some kind? And what is your availability for the month of September? So it's usually a reach out like something like that. And that means that it could be one of these brand ambassador deals. And what happens is that it usually starts with one of the younger people on a PR team staff, and they will reach out to a bunch of different brands, because they probably have to reach out to 20 people to find people that are like either legit enough or that aren't under contract with a competitor of some kind. And so as they reach out, that is the very first step. So how can you get them to reach out to you? You can add things, you can add language onto your website so that they can find you. If you don't have a spokesperson page, then you need to have a spokesperson page of some kind. You can have a speaker's page, but have a spokesperson page. And you would put a one sheet on there that talks about your experience, your expertise, some of the things we've talked about. If you've even done in-kind work with other people, those are people that are clients because you disclose, hashtag ad, that kind of thing. So you can add those, and you begin to build that out. You add brand ambassador, influencer, and spokesperson to everything that you have out there on public so that when they go looking, they can find you. And then they can see that this is something that you do. You have to have a one sheet that is spokesperson specific. And it's not the same one sheet that you'll use for speaking. It's not the same one sheet that you will use for other things. Let it be tailor-made to spokesperson work and brand ambassador work. That elevates your level of expertise. They realize you've done this before. It doesn't take that much more to go ahead and create one that uses the language throughout that is geared towards this ability to do that. The second thing that you're going to need is a rate sheet that is separate from your media kit for spokesperson work. The rate sheet is something that you will establish as your rates. I've already given you some ideas for rates, and you will start to list what it will cost for someone to work with you for social posts, for blogs, for a lot of these deliverables that we've talked about, for RMTs, for SMTs, for one-off of media, for a media day, or part of a media appearance day. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes at the very end. But you need a rate sheet. So how do you know if something's legit? So you get an inquiry that comes in, and it's like, whoa, are they just going to wanting to, do this for free? Is it in kind? Or can this be a little bit legitimate deal? And the answer is, you don't know. You don't know. It's wild. There have been times when an inquiry will come in, and I'm sure that this is no money at all. This is just like nothing. They're going to try to post something for free. They'll send me a pair of glasses, or no, this isn't anything. And it'll translate into a $15K deal. There's others that come in and I'm thinking, whoa, whoa, whoa. This looks like it could be about a $25K deal. And then it's like nothing. They're not paying anything. They're going to promote your brand on their channels, reaching 5 million people or all that. So it's just a trade-off. It's in kind. So the answer is you don't know. That's why you have to follow up on every one of them as if they are legit. So that's the very first step that happens. And just a little differentiation here. It's a little bit in the weeds, but I'm just going to go ahead and explain it. Sometimes PR firms are reaching out to you to get a client. So they don't have Citibank yet, but they're pitching a concept for a campaign to Citibank, and in their thoroughness of pitching that concept, because they want to get Citibank as a client, they've already fleshed out what a campaign would cost, including brand ambassadors. And they give 3 brand ambassadors that they could choose from. That's a little bit for us. That's about 50% less likely that it's going to go through, because they don't even have the client yet. So sometimes one of the things I ask is this for an existing or prospective client? And then that helps me manage my expectations. If it's an existing client, well, now my chances have just doubled that I might get a gig out of this. So that's just a little sidebar. So then the next thing is that they're going to ask queries and rates, availability, and then you send your rate sheet. And then they may have a conference call with you, because it's the job of the PR firms to be able to get the best talent for the best campaign. And you may say you're all these things, unless they have click-throughs to watch your media or to see that, they're not quite sure how you will do. So that either the PR firm or even the client may talk with you on the phone to kind of vet you a little bit and to just see how polished you are and how well you do. So make sure that when you're doing that, that you work on not having filler words or uhs or ums or anything like that. And the reason is because if you're constantly saying things, and as you're talking, you're like saying things like that, and so that's not a really good example. I'm not a great actress like Bethany is. But the point is that subliminally, even if your ums are pretty smooth, subliminally you come across as less confident and less assured. Because you have to and you don't know where you're going with it. It's just a subliminal thing that's the way that it comes through. And then after the conference call, there'll be an offer if you're going to get it. Just keep in mind that they're usually pitching a number of people. So that's why it's important that when you have this dialogue with them, you tell them things to seal the deal. So to say, hey, you know what? I really love Hilton and the Hilton brand. In fact, I'm a Diamond member, And I might be working on Diamond for Life because I've been a Diamond member for a dozen years. Or you can say we've banked with Wells Fargo for 15 years. Because Wells Fargo is going to be looking for brands because they need to do something about their reputation. They really do. And speaking of that, keep your integrity level high. I turn down about 9 out of 10 people that want to work for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're not at the point where they need to work with us because they haven't built out their platform. Other times, we don't have the same integrity level just in terms of what the kind of work we'll accept. So if you will rep something that's not good for your community, you will lose your community because you recommended that prepaid legal thing to them, and when the settlement finally came out, they got 20% out of 100% of that settlement. So it's not worth selling your integrity for, and you can be true, and you can turn things down. You don't have to take brand work that comes along. You don't have to take it at all. So then at some point you'll get an offer after you're going to be negotiating before you get an offer. So you can negotiate pricing. On our rate sheets, we have like an a la carte menu like you do at a restaurant. So if you buy everything a la carte at the restaurant, it's going to cost more than if you're bundled. But bundling may reduce the overall expense for the client by 10% at the most. Usually it's a 5% discount. I have had people that have come to me and I've said, okay, the scope of work, you always ask for a scope of work. I didn't write that in there, so SOW. You ask for an SOW when you're bidding out what you'll do the project for. And the scope of work says absolutely everything that's on there. And you want an SOW for 2 reasons. Number one, they will try to talk you into more than what you've agreed to. Or they'll add extra things in all the time. There'll be things in the contract, extra social mentions, or Facebook Live instead of a Facebook post. So there'll be all these little nuances that can come in, and you can go back to the SOW and say, oh no, oh heck no. It's not even in there, so we're not going to be doing that. And then it also allows you, there's a difference between a blog post with 2 social mentions and 5 blog posts with social mentions and then maybe a live event. So you can discount it a little bit, but I have brands all the time that will try to say, let's meet halfway. I bid $50,000, well, let's meet halfway at 25. Not all the time, they don't do that all the time, but they do try to discount it quite a bit. And the way I liken it is, look, this brand is a Mercedes. This is not a 10-year-old Chevy. And you don't walk into a Mercedes dealership and say, hey, how about half price on that brand new Mercedes? So that's the way I liken it to them, because that's just not going to go. That's not the level of negotiation. The level of give is only about 5 to 10%. So make sure when you bid out your rates, that's really close to what you're doing it for. Don't start out high expecting to come down 20% low. The key on rates is to be mainstream enough to get the gig. If you're way too overpriced for your numbers, for your platform numbers, for your social numbers, you're going to lose the gig because you're way overpriced. But then who wants to leave money on the table? So that's my strategy, is tough but fair. You want to never leave any money on the table by going too low. So one of the things I do is I feel that it's a little bit too high because maybe we've just raised numbers on one of my clients. We've just gone from $600 per post to $1,000 per post, a little bit high. So if I feel like there's a little bit of wiggle room, I'll say to the client, look, we want to help you work within your budget. So here's the price. So if I say those words up front, then they won't just say, nope, you don't get the job at all. They'll come back and ask for a price that's comfortable to them, and then we can decide if we're going to take that deal or not. Then the contract itself. You've got to read through that very, very carefully. And a lawyer could read through the contract for legalese, but if the lawyer's not working in the space, then they don't even know. They don't even know. For example, when I first started doing this on my own, before I did a couple of, actually, this was with my spokesperson agent. And it was for Bounty paper towels, and there was something written in there that I would do 5 national interviews, and it said generated by the client, by the spokesperson. And that little bit, and then I didn't meet it, then I had to get an extension, and that was a lot of problems. So make sure, and the terms, guys, Terms are really important. So if you do work, they may want to try to, you may do like 3 months worth of work, and they may want to try to lock you down in exclusivity for an entire year after you're done with the project. You know what that means? If you're working in financial services and you're a financial expert, that means you just locked down 9 months worth of work, and you can't work for anybody else. So be sure on those exclusivity terms that it's something that you can live with. And this is an example. Tiffany gave me permission to be able to post this. This is what the numbers look like for one of the top experts in the industry. This is a goal. Teddy Roosevelt said that comparison is the thief of joy. So don't compare yourself to these numbers. But this is a woman that was sitting in this audience 4 years ago, had about 1/5 of those numbers, and is now one of the six-figure-a-year earners that was able to do that. That is the one sheet that we send out that waters your eyes initially. And Amanda Bea is a client here too. And I didn't ask your permission, so I didn't put up your numbers. Yeah, that's right, sorry. Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up here, and I think it's important as you do this work to keep your why in mind. By doing this kind of work, it enabled me to be able to provide for all of my children that are there, to send them to college to pay for weddings. It enabled us to be able to found Heroes at Home, which is a nonprofit that helps military families all around the world. And that is the why that I do things for. All right, so let's go ahead and start taking a few questions. Amanda. Okay, so Amanda's question is, what do you do when you're a part of a campaign with a number of influencers and the other influencers have lowballed them so much that it impacts your numbers? And you can't dilute the value of your brand. And so you pretty much stick to your numbers, and you can, I mean, you don't denigrate other people. And the fact that you even know other people's numbers is a little bit different. Don't ever share your numbers. Don't share it in your private Facebook page. Don't tell them what you're getting per social post. Don't do that, because that could really come back to bite you eventually. Oh, the agency told you that. Well, okay, yeah. So they're like, cops in a negotiation. They can lie to you. So you don't negotiate. They can tell you whatever they want to get you to do whatever they want. So I just say stick to your guns without shooting yourself in the foot. So if you would be willing to do that for lower numbers, then you could take it. If not, just say, well, I've done a lot of work in this space. These are my numbers. I don't want to dilute the value of my brand, although I'd love to work with you. You're a great company, and I would deliver. I know I would. All right, back there. Okay, so the question was that on TV, he has a segment already that is sponsored by brands. He wants to leverage that into brand work with the brands. And so what I think you can do is that you can have a query letter that goes out. You develop your one sheet, you develop your rate sheet, and you send out a query letter that says, we've had a lot of traction. My community really resonates with your sponsorship of this segment. I would love to do more work for you in the brand space. I'm available. And then list off all the deliverables that you're comfortable with that you would be available to do. So you're pitching them, you're leveraging something that's good, that's an existing relationship, so you're not cold calling, and then you're taking it on from there. All right, here. So the online influencer network is like Tap Influence, or something like that. Okay, that can give you kind of a gauge, but they always lowball, it seems, for whatever reason. I think because they work on behalf of the company. The client that, the brand ambassador is working for, everybody's in the same place, and I feel like those numbers are a little bit lowballed. So if you plug in your numbers, it's a good place to kind of get a general idea in case and if your numbers are lower than what they're offering, then you really know your numbers are too low. So we're talking about Tap Influence. That's just my opinion. Jerry, real quick. Okay, so I have a boutique agency, and your threshold is a 5K deal. It's not worth my time. I take 15% of what you bring to me, 20% of what I bring to you. So I'm still not at the 25% for everything. But it's not worth my time for anything less than a 5K deal. And a 5K deal is about at $40,000 to $50,000. I mean, not 40 to 50K of people in your network. And that can be multiple platforms. You may have more on Facebook, less on Twitter, whatever. That's a collective of all of those. Back in the back? Oh, yes. Yes, I said I would talk about that, right? So FTC has disclosure requirements, and all of those requirements are going to be in the contract. So that means that when you have a blog, you have to disclose. If you're doing an SMT, usually the producers disclose, the people that are building, the RMT vendor, the SMT vendor, the ones that are building all the shows for you, they disclose to the television show, and then the television show will disclose, or they'll tell you to disclose. So they'll do it in some way to where it's in compliance. So it is important because you can get in trouble. Always disclose. They've gotten even more stringent in recent years than they were before. And all of that will be listed very clearly, and their legal team will tell you how they want you to be able to disclose. What's the time this session end? Like right now? Okay, I'm going to be here later, guys. Please come up front. I have cards up here if you want them, and let's talk. Come up. Okay, thank you.